Welcome to the show today. It's so nice to meet you, Melissa.
Thank you. Super nice to meet you and be chatting with you.
Oh, we've already had our little chat, so now we actually get to record. It's interesting because your name is, can you tell everyone your full name?
Melissa Strong.
How many times have people said to you, Strong, interesting? What an interesting last name based on your story.
Definitely people comment on that and feel as though it is 100% appropriate. And I explain that I got the good fortune of marrying into that name 20 years ago now. So it was Melissa Gargano.
Oh, so strong. You definitely took that. Now, you were a climber. Can we start there first? So
Sure.
tell us about what that was like.
Well, honestly, I didn't find climbing until a little later in my life, which I think is great for people to hear and know that. I think a lot of people feel as though, to be an athlete or to be in shape, you have to have done it since you were a
Mhm.
kid or something. But I didn't start climbing until I was 26. And it's a little different story. I was kind of just still living my glory days from college, just working in restaurants and taking my hard earned cash to the local watering hole and having real fun with my friends and closing the bars down and dance parties and then, sleep the day away and repeat. And I would go to work. And I lived in Estes Park. I still live in Estes Park, Colorado. So this beautiful gateway to Rocky Mountain National Park. And I would go to work and all these people would just be beaming and so happy. And, oh, I got out and I went for a hike in the park today, or I went rock climbing today. And, one day it just kind of hit me that that dim, smoky bar room was definitely not my future. And maybe these people weren't the good friends that I thought they were. And I tried to run around Lake Estes, which is maybe like a 3.5 mile run, thinking, oh, no problem. Like today, I'm just going to go out and do something. I'm just going to run. I'm off the couch, no big deal. I couldn't even run a half a mile. And I was just appalled at myself. I couldn't believe it that I just let myself at such a young age kind of feel this way. And so right then, standing on the path around Lake Estes, I swore I was going to change my life. And I had a little time to think about it until I got home. Then I got home and called my great friend Bronson and said, "Hey, you know how you're always asking me to go climbing or inviting me? I would love to join you." And she said, "Great, we're going tomorrow." And so I also made golf lessons for that day, just in case the climbing didn't work out for me. And ever since I've
Backup.
been, yeah, exactly, climbing and golfing ever since that Wednesday years ago.
And so that first climb, did you know as soon as you did that first climb, you're like, oh, this is something that I think I want to do again?
Definitely. I just, and to be honest, I explained this in the book that I wrote, that there were a few other times where I ventured out on a rope and attempted to climb, but it was more like I was coerced into it opposed to my decision to embrace this. And that day, it was a group of girls and it was just really cool. Just the camaraderie, the encouragement, and then the climb itself. And I just, at that point, I had only done a few very easy traditional climbs, and this was sport climbing, so a little different format. And, I was shaking. I didn't have the muscles. I didn't have, anything to get me up that climb. And so, as I was desperately hanging on, my friend yelled to me, "It's okay, just sit back on the rope." And I'm like, what is she talking about? Sit on the rope. And then eventually, I did. I pushed my weight off the rock and took a break and just stared at the top of that climb. And I just wanted to get to the top. And it meant the world to me for some reason that day to get to the top of that climb. And, with the right coaching and the right encouragement, I did. And after that, I knew I never wanted to do anything but climb again.
And so then it just continued because you started to climb more. And can you tell us about like your next step there? Because you didn't just climb, you became a sponsored climber. What does that
Right.
mean?
Well, at that point years ago, it was different. There wasn't a climbing gym on every corner, and there weren't even necessarily. I mean, there were a handful of women in the sport, but there weren't a ton of women in the sport, and people weren't starting it at 6 months old or a year old. So for me, I was able to grow in the sport and excel at it pretty quickly. And my passion kind of turned towards bouldering specifically, which is another form of climbing. And as I got better, I wrote to companies and they said, yeah, we'd love to sponsor you. So in that case, it was a lot of free items, a lot of free clothing, free crash pads, free climbing shoes, free chalk. And then some companies as well gave me some travel money. So that was always, fun to little extra cash for your climbing trip.
Hmm. And so how long did you climb for? Like during that, until we get to the next part of your story?
Honestly, I climbed every day,
Every day.
that I could possibly, physically climb. Of course, your body needs a little rest here and there.
Hmm?
But if you're not climbing, then you're training for your next climb. So it was definitely defined kind of my way of life.
Mm, beautiful. Can you remember one in particular where it was like, I don't know if I can do this, but I know I know I'm built to do it and I want to do it. How did you dig in some of those really hard climbs that you did? Like, what was one of the harder ones that you did?
Like before the accident, I would say I was climbing like V11, V12, which is hard for a lot of people. Some people never climb that in their lifetime. And there were tons of times that I had to dig deep, tons of times that I never thought I would ever get to the top of this climb. And sometimes I never did. Sometimes I would climb the hard part of the climb and then fall off the easy top over and over again. So it's definitely something you have to stay completely dedicated to, and a sport where you can really get, kind of knocked around and defeated a lot, but you continue to go back and try again. It's
Hmm.
not always a reward sport.
Well, that's an interesting way to say it. And does it become a you versus you? Like it's not a team sport. I mean, not saying you don't have support, but it is a you versus you. And that so it can be such a mental battle sometimes.
100%. And that's what I think I loved about it so much is, I don't know. I just, again, we were athletic as kids where we went skiing as a family and we grew up by the ocean. So you had to know how to swim, but I was never, a team sport person. Like I tried out for softball in the 7th grade and didn't make it. And I think that kind of sealed the deal for me. Maybe it was the 8th grade. But and then I wasn't always good at sports where balls were coming at me. I tended to duck, and then and have some good stories about my high school gym teacher in there. But
Well, you were like basically told you were unathletic. Like you were not, this was,
oh yeah,
yeah.
I was not encouraged. It was just you're falling in this category. Just kind of like I was told that you're a bad singer, but by my grandmother. And then one day I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not that bad. But it's funny how those brands just kind of stick with you and can kind of be this shadow.
Mhm.
And I think for that reason too, I turned away from team sports. And then when I found climbing, and again, golf kind of parallels it a little bit because it's all mental. It's all you versus you. And you're just trying to do better than you did last time. And it really resonated with me and it really clicked with me. And the fact that and that's what I loved about bouldering too, is that you kind of take that hard part of the climb, the crux of the climb, and it's right in front of you on this rock. And we're all going to climb it differently because we're all different shapes and sizes and we have different strengths. And I loved figuring out the puzzle because it was a personal puzzle. It was the big picture. Everyone got to try this puzzle, but the solution was very individual.
So it's interesting if you look at each one as a puzzle and you say how individual it is it like if you were to climb the same rock that was a challenge, would you find that like one day you would try something and maybe the next time you would try it differently? Like, is you're different each day?
100%. Yeah. And like some days your right arm is fatigued. It's just like maybe you went and swung a hammer or dug in the garden and you don't even realize it. And then the next day you're climbing and you're like, wow, that's not going to work. So today, I'll twist my body this way, I'll shift this way, and I'll go up with my left arm. And then maybe that unlocks the puzzle for you as well.
Wow. Wow. How long? I know you said you started at 26. How long were you climbing before you had your accident?
Um, so I started climbing right around 1999, and the accident was in 2017. And I had just come back from a climbing trip and just climbed on our climbing wall the day of the accident.
And can you tell us a little bit about the accident, where it was, what happened, and then we want to get into like your recovery and what that looked like.
For sure. So I was in my home. I was opening a restaurant. So I had worked in the restaurant industry, hospitality industry for about 22, 3 years at that point. And I had decided I wanted to open my own restaurant. So I had searched, found a location, was able to secure the location. I still hadn't secured funds yet. I was borrowing money from my family to make this all work. And we were under construction. The location I found had only been operated in the summer months, so it wasn't even winterized. So we had quite a big project ahead of us. And as I got into it, I realized the dollar amounts of what I would need to invest in this were just growing. So to save a little money, I decided to take the tables from the old restaurant and make them look like they were going to fit into the new renovations. I still hadn't figured that out. I was painting them. I was trying wood burning tools. And one day my husband said, "Oh, check this out. This is really cool." And it was this design in the wood that's done with electricity. And it makes this pattern that almost looks like rivers on a map or veins. It's really, really cool looking. It's called the Lichtenberg technique, but it's also very dangerous. And, of course, you can figure out how to do all this yourself on the internet. And so I asked my husband to make the machine for me, which he did. And he showed me how to use it and warned me, I can't even say how many times, this is very dangerous. Whatever you do, don't pick up these two leads. They're almost like little clamps on like jumper cables. Like, whatever you do, don't pick these up when the machine is attached to or plugged into the wall. And I just made a near fatal mistake, and I did exactly what he told me not to do. I got a little comfortable. I decided to do some burns outside one day. I had only been doing them in our garage. So I moved everything outside and unwrapped an extension cord to see if everything would fit. And I plugged it in. I'm like, okay, yep, that length will do, no problem. Normally, when I plugged the machine into the wall, there was a little spark. So I think that distracted me as well because there was no spark with the extension cord. And I think in the back of my head, I thought, oh, maybe it's just not even plugged into the wall. Then I remembered I forgot the baking soda and water that you paint on the wood. Dropped the extension cord and the cord that was connected, went inside, got the baking soda and water, came back outside, picked up the leads, and that was that. I was connected to the electric chain.
You had a near-death experience at this time.
Yeah, so I would say I was about 20 seconds where I was trapped in the electric chain. And this sounds really odd, but I'm grateful for the fact that I have such a vivid memory of it. And, while in that 20 seconds, I was alone with my thoughts. And of course, it was like, well, this is exactly what Adam told me not to do, was my first thought. And then my second thought was, can I scream? No. Can I, shake my arms and maybe one of the leads would get dislodged? I couldn't move. I couldn't make my vocal cords make a sound. I thought, well, at least maybe I could fall over. And I couldn't even fall over. And that's when I just accepted that I had no escape and I was dying. And then everything went dark. And that's when my eyes opened up and I saw the forest and the tunnel. And I was just in this beautiful forest. And I was actually kind of distracted by the beauty of the forest at first. It just was gorgeous. And it was these tall trees with this sunlight coming through, illuminating this like bed of ferns on the forest floor. It was really just a very peaceful, beautiful place. And then I turned my head and there was a tunnel hanging in the forest. And then that's when I continued the conversation with myself and said, is this really happening? And, I'm a vivid dreamer. And so I was questioning, like, is this a dream or what happened? And I said, no, this is really happening. You're here. And there were these like shadowy figures floating in between me and the tunnel. And that's when I said, I just want to get out of here. And I think if I can get back and get to help, I think, that's what I want to do. And then it was just kind of like reverse tunnel effect, I guess. I just opened my eyes and it took me a minute to figure out where I was. Um, and I realized that I was face down on my gravel driveway. And that's when all of those screams that were trapped inside of me just erupted.
And that's when they came out. So at that point, when you did come to and realize where you were, was that like you had let go of the leads and everything? Like now it's like you're on this side. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of said that to describe it a little bit. It's almost like I didn't know where I was and I didn't know where I landed. So it took me a minute to kind of figure out like, where the heck am I? And yes, I did get the chance to come back. And at that time, I didn't understand why I got the chance. Like I didn't understand why the electricity had stopped. And later on, we figured out that it was, I tripped the breaker on the house. So I had surged the power.
So the power that it surged tripped the breaker on the house, which turned it off.
Yeah, that was the only way. If not, my husband would have just come looking for me at some point and just found me completely burnt to a crisp.
Isn't that almost a surreal, it was like a strange blessing that it oversurged the power and
It's
it turned
huge.
off. Wow.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea
Yeah.
how long this was, this time period?
That's why I guess it was like 20 seconds. And I've always said that from the beginning. And it's funny, I'll meet people who are electricians and they just, completely and just like grab the gravity of this situation. And the first person I described it to, and I said 20 seconds. And I said, but honestly, I'm just estimating that. And he said, no, that's about how long it takes to trip a breaker. So I just go with the 20 seconds.
Wow. Okay. So the breaker gets tripped, the power goes out. You're now coming to, and I'm assuming screaming in pain also at this point. And then what happened?
No,
Pain.
I think it was all adrenaline at that point. So I didn't feel pain until my husband got me to the hospital. So all the screams erupted, which little did I know, kind of interrupted the neighborhood. I heard stories afterwards about all the people, including to this day. I just did a talk in our town at the library and someone came to me and told me how they heard the screams. And I'm like, oh, wow, another piece to the puzzle 9 years later. But somehow my husband didn't hear it. We have this old forced air propane heater in the house. And I think the fan was going and he just did not hear the screams. So somehow I stood up and I took 5 steps towards our front door. That was the first time I glanced at my hands and saw the carnage of what was left. And I just, obviously I couldn't grab a doorknob or anything. So I just screamed into the corner of the front door and he came running out and I just held up my hands and I said, hospital now. And he picked me up and ran me to his truck and threw me in the passenger side. And we, ran around and we were off to the hospital.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That's what I was wondering how you got there. And so what happened at the end to your hands? Can you explain a little bit about what you had to go through and that recovery?
Well, as my doctor said, I was like a hot dog in a microwave and I was cooking from the inside out. So because your bones have more density than your skin, and the electricity traveled through my body because it has to come out somewhere as well. But the contact point were my hands, that the bones burnt first. And so when I looked at my hands, what I saw was just almost what looked like melted wax. There wasn't any blood because it was all cauterized. And then where I don't have fingers any longer, you could see burnt bones sticking out of my hands, and the images are all there. A lot of them are on my website, which is melissaistrong.com. And there's a lot of warnings for people because, not everyone wants to see it, which I completely understand. So the recovery process was very long and uncertain. When they flew me in a helicopter from our small town down to a burn center that's, great for frostbite and burns. And when they woke me up, they said that I would only have 4 fingers, which were going to be my pinkies and my index fingers. And but they were going to transfer me, and I'm like, great, like, get me out of here if that's the diagnosis. But they did warn me that, the doctor at the other hospital saw the pictures, and he's does amazing work, but he's not very optimistic seeing the pictures. And I just, at that time, especially when you hear you only have 4 fingers, I just wanted hope. I just wanted someone to say they would try to help at all, like no matter what it looked like. And luckily, I landed at UC Health Anschutz, which is in Aurora, Colorado, right outside of Denver. And this amazing plastic surgeon came in and looked at my hands, and definitely didn't have that optimistic look on his face, but called to a nurse and asked for a needle. And I still had my original thumb tips, and he pricked them, and he said, if there's any blood flow, I'll try to help. And explained that the only fingers that have arteries on the backs of them are your thumbs. And if it's still delivering blood, then he has something to work with. And that was obviously a huge moment for me, for my husband, and for my family that was in the room, that there were tiny pools of blood that showed up. And it was just, then someone would try to help me, which was just the beginning of a very, long journey. It was 38 days in the hospital with 8 surgeries total.
I think this is a piece of it. Like, I mean, I spent years in working in post-rehab, and I'd see post-rehab work. Burn post-rehab, very different, like very, very different. So extensive. So, you said 8 surgeries in 3 weeks. Was that correct?
A lot of a handful of the surgeries were
Okay.
months later.
Mm-hmm. So multiple surgeries. Can you just describe what they were able to do? Because they said you'd have 4 fingers, right?
Right. So we went from 4 fingers to what I call 7 3/4. It's just how I do the math and add up the nubs.
Yeah.
And it was really cool. My doctor's actually from Canada, but works and lives now in the United States. And he really is, without him and without the care at UC Health, I wouldn't have had the outcome that I have today. But he got very progressive and injected my hands with the same dye they use in an angiogram. So when they want to see the blockage in your heart, he did that to my hands and then x-rayed them. This is one of the debridement surgeries early on where they're just cleaning up dead tissue and looking around. And when he did that, he was able to see in x-rays everywhere there was blood flow. And that he knew he had what he had to work with and what he, probably was not salvageable. And so after kind of having that roadmap, then he decided to do, in layman's terms, what's called a flap surgery. And they've been apparently doing this forever, since some of the first reconstructive surgeries that were ever done. I think in the book I refer to like 300 BC or something like that. But he wound up sewing my arms into my hands, my thumbs into my opposing forearms. So initially I was calling it the I Dream of Jeannie pose. And then as it went along, I started calling it the straitjacket pose.
And that was a big part of this, because I read that part and I was like, wow, that's how they basically were rebuilding to have the fingers that you would have today.
Yeah, because there was so much damage on my thumbs, where the palms were gone, leading into the thumb tips, and the thumb bones were exposed and burnt. And so to try to create large pieces of skin that would now kind of be my new thumbs, the skin needed to be connected to the vascularity of the new skin. So it was easier for when they divided it for the skin to find its new home and settle in there and be accepted there by my body. And as well, they did this to just introduce good blood flow to the area to see, anything else that might come alive or spark with some blood flow and be saved.
Okay, this is incredible. Honestly, it's amazing what they can do technology-wise. It's amazing. How long were you like in the process of the hospital and your surgeries and recovery? What's that timeline look like for you?
That was the 38 days, and it was long and it was slow, as you can imagine, especially 3 weeks of being sewn together was challenging to say the least.
Mhm.
But when Dr. Ignachev told me that one day where he saw the tiny pools and said that he would help me, right then and there, I vowed that I would be the best patient ever because someone was willing to help and someone was giving me the potential to hope beyond four fingers. And when he first posed the idea, because the first couple surgeries were just debridement and go in and clean up and poke around and the dye. Then the next surgery was the we're gonna attach you. I was kind of so consumed by the thought of having my arms sewed together and being in this position that I didn't even think about the pain that would come with that. So a lot of that was pain management as well, of kind of waking up each day and facing a grim reality and not knowing the future and not knowing, how many fingers will I have? What will I be able to do? I'm opening this restaurant. I love to rock climb. I tried to just push the rock climbing away because it felt like a silly thought even at that point. But it was still a huge part of me and my life and my husband's life. So of course those thoughts crept in, whether you try to put them in a box and put them away. And then, so each day I would say was very, very slow and kind of very tedious. But then in the end, also strangely beautiful. I've had a friend who heard my laments firsthand about, oh, now I can't, because when my hands were bandaged independently, someone could put a big t-shirt over me or something and I could walk around outside. But now with my arms sewn together, I'm like, what am I going to do for 3 weeks of just sitting here? Um, and she took my lament back up to our little town and shared it with a friend. And that friend had just had a baby and was kind of dressing the baby in a little onesie and snapping the snaps on the shoulders. And she had the idea of, why don't I make some t-shirts for Melissa that snap from, the shirt sleeve ending all the way to the collar on both sides. So someone could pull it up me like a tube and over my folded, sewed together arms and snap me up. So that was really amazing. There was coincidentally an art exhibit. So UC Health is a hospital, but it's also a campus because it's a teaching hospital. And the inventor of the defibrillator had his artwork on display there. And so I can't even remember how much, like $20-30 million worth of artwork was 5 minutes away from my hospital room. And someone would dress me and I would walk there every day, whether I was alone or with a visitor. And just really got to be distracted from the horror show that was at the end of my arms.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to stare at Renoir and Monet and Degas instead of this truly like nightmare that I was kind of trapped in. And that was it was awesome for my healing. I know not many people are going to get that great experience of having this art museum and you're for a hospital. But for me, it put me back into society, just standing next to someone else looking at a piece of art, which also was hugely impactful for me because when you're in that hospital setting, you kind of feel removed from life. So it was interesting to be back in life and just around so much beauty. And I really think it helped me ease the days.
It speaks to your mindset and most likely like who you are as a person, but everything you also built during those climbing years, like the mindset piece to, yes, it was incredible that you had and were able to see that. And you could take somebody who had it right there and they wouldn't have seen it. They wouldn't have appreciated it. It wouldn't have helped to shift the mindset. So it does speak volumes to you as a person because that must have been like obviously a very difficult time for you. But I also know that that was a time where you started to even shift and think even bigger. Like, is this a moment where you started to think about a book or sharing the story and putting some ideas together? Was it this early or when did that come in?
That was a little bit later. I think, at this point, I just had so little use of hands. Eventually, I realized sewn together I could use one index finger. And that did help me shift and work on the restaurant. So that's another thing I focused on when I was in the hospital is, I knew I had this restaurant to open and the loan finally got secured, kind of like 2 or 3 days in the hospital. But then when they showed me my hands for the first time, so now we're 3 weeks later, where we did immense amounts of skin graft and skin moving when they unsewed me, I guess. And then for 7 days, I had to sit completely still or as still as possible for the skin grafts to just kind of take into their new home. And then after that, they showed me my hands, which was horrific. And yet, more skills and tools that I needed to stay on that right side of despair. But he said, to start using your hands. And I'm like, what the heck am I going to do with these? How am I going to use them? And I asked my husband to get me a pen and paper from the nurse's station. And those were the first words I wrote. And I think that's, kind of when I came full circle back into, I used to write a lot before the accident, before the restaurant. I went to school for literature. I journaled, as a kid, and then went to school for literature. And then I wrote about climbing because that's what I like to do, and got published in climbing magazines. So these were the first words that I wrote down with my new hands. And I think that kind of sparked or just kind of brought me back to the writing piece, and that I knew that writing for me was very therapeutic. And it's something that I needed to do. When I got back from the hospital, my writing was very distant and cold. It was very matter of fact. I was just getting the words out of what was happening to me at the time. And once I started to see, the things that we can't see, we don't have those crystal balls when we're sitting in a hospital room. But once I started to see that positive outcome and I'm going to open a restaurant and I think I'm going to be able to get back into rock climbing again, that's when I really felt that I needed to write the story completely and share it with people, because I never would have thought I would have come that far.
No, there's so many moving parts there. And so when you talk about the restaurant, when did it actually open?
So it opened 6 months after the accident. So the accident was April 2017, and we opened in October 2017. We were just going to open the first day we could with construction. Obviously, everyone who's ever constructed anything knows that there's delays after delays. And our busy season, since we're the entrance to Rocky Mountain National Park, is in the summer. And the season just kind of ends at the end of October, and it's a ghost town for a while. And so we were just, any day that we could get in October before the end of October would be helpful. And we wound up opening on my birthday, which was October 3rd. So it was just kind of a funny twist that happened.
Amazing. And so you have 2 restaurants? Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. In 2022, I opened up the second one.
Oh, okay. Amazing. So here we are, your 6-month post, the restaurant opens. And during that time, had you been doing some writing? Like, when was your book published?
It was published March 2026. So
Okay,
just
recently.
like a month and a half ago, 2 months ago now.
I have it. I'm sorry, my screen's all, but it's like climbing through. It is an incredible story. It's absolutely incredible. And so during that time there, like when was there a point where you went, okay, I'm working on writing, I'm seeing what's possible, when was the point where you went, I think a book is coming?
I mean, honestly, as soon as the restaurant got up and going, it was kind of right then. So it was like around 2018. Then I said, I really need to write. And I started, just writing when I could. I mean, when you just opened a restaurant, you have, 90 employees in the summer, 60 in the winter at one restaurant, lots of moving parts, 7 days a week, lunch and dinner. There wasn't necessarily a lot of time to write, but I still found the time and I wrote. And then in 2019, I was still sponsored by a climbing shoe company called 510 that eventually got bought by Adidas. And Adidas really heard my story and believed in it. And they sent me to a writing clinic that was put on by Rock and Ice, which is a magazine now that's absorbed by climbing. And I went to this writing clinic, very excited, very, happy to have this opportunity. And they said, great, we're so happy. Everyone's here to write an article, and whoever, we will pick the article, and whoever we pick will get published. And I said, well, that's great, but I'm writing a book. And they said, well, okay, you're here to write an article though. And I said, no, yes, but I'm writing a book. Thank you. And they're like, well, Melissa, just so you know, John Krakauer wrote Into Thin Air, and it started as an article. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. I'll write that article then.
And then it'll be the book.
That will be the book. So, and that's kind of what happened. However, I had to pause a little bit for that pandemic. Kind of hard to think of and be creative when, the whole world as you know it is crashing, and you don't know if your business is going to survive.
Well, and you have restaurants. I know that we had different experiences. Everybody had different experiences depending where you were with the pandemic. But what was that time like for you and running restaurants? Like,
terrifying. It was horrible.
It had to be.
It was, we had purchased the building across the street from us for the other concept restaurant, and of course just halted any plans on that. I was like, okay, well, I just have to hold my breath and see if we're, can get through this. And I mean, you name it, everything from just the fear of existing at that time that we all went through, to then knowing that your business was basically shuttered and you had no control or say over that. And now worried about your employees' mental health and trying to research all the government programs that were coming out and find out how they work and how I can make this work. And then the limited capacity. I mean, that was just such a nightmare. And they were trying to, force us to get every person that came into the restaurant to get their contact information for contact tracing. We're a country of lots of different people with different approaches. And so, you're getting these people and you're asking for their information, and they're screaming at your staff, and your staff is just trying to do the job. And, we're just doing what we're told we have to do to operate. And it was horrible. I mean, it truly was. And, then it's like, okay, limited capacity, but you can have this outside seating. And so, we've got this, I hadn't been able to even improve the parking lots necessarily. So they're like parking lots full of potholes. And I've got 2 20 by 20 tents set up, and I'm in a dining room outside. And my staff's like, you really want me to serve food out there? And I'm like, 100%. Like that's
wherever we can.
We can serve food.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I was, for everyone, it was just such a hard time, and just so happy to have gotten through that. Was in itself a huge challenge, and get the restaurant through it as well. And thank goodness, we did. It's something that left a mark on all of us.
Mm-hmm. It definitely did. I knew when I read your story and looking at 2 restaurants during that time, I thought, oh my goodness, like that's a business that took a real hit, was restaurants.
Yeah. And restaurants around us, I mean, many of them closed and never opened up again. Mm-hmm. So we were lucky to, I say lucky, but a lot of it was hard work too. It was a combination of luck and hard work that got us through. And again, I paused, the construction on the second one, and then we didn't open that until 2022, which in itself was challenging, trying to build anything during the supply chain.
I was just going to say that the supply chain was a nightmare on top of it. So you just if you think of your last 9 years, it has been a lot of very big challenges that you walked through. And then infertility is a big part of your story as well.
Yes. And I share that in the book, which is, I mean, I'm so happy that people are enjoying the book, because it's not a book about someone else. It's a book about all of my hardships, so it is challenging, sharing all of the worst mistake I ever made, plus all of the hardest things I've ever lived through. And sometimes it's like, especially before it came out, it's kind of like, why am I making this all so public? But I know why. And the point is that, and I say this a lot, you don't have to burn your hands off to be going through a hard time, and that we all go through hard times, whether it's, a relationship ending, a loved one dying, a diagnosis, addiction. I mean, you name it. Life just keeps delivering, and infertility is one of them. And so I just felt like having honest, open conversations and sharing that we are going, I've gone through this difficult time. You might be too. This is, some of the tools that I found. Maybe this might help other people. But the infertility one was hard because I also had to admit that I gave up, that I physically and mentally could only do one round of in vitro. And I know many of women that have done 6, 7, you name it, rounds, and I applaud them. I mean, it's such a challenging thing to go through, so it's difficult because I know my choice of one round and being done isn't everyone's choice. But I wanted to share my thoughts and what I went through and what my body went through and why I chose that.
Thank you for sharing that. And you're right. There's so many different ways. I know people who've gone through 2 rounds or 3 rounds and have also said very candidly, it was like the worst experience ever. It was like, yes, they're grateful that they both ended up conceiving, but the process through it is just far more grueling, I think, than what most of us have any idea.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a challenge for sure.
So I love when people share the real, like raw, vulnerable, the true, what it's like, because, no matter what, I do believe that, as you just said, right, you don't have to burn your hands off in order to be going through a hard time. We are so much more connected by our stories, by our emotions, by our experiences, rather than just the details of the story. But what you went through during that time it's absolutely incredible. And I think it's fantastic. I'll make sure that everything is there in the show notes to connect with your book. And like I said, I enjoyed reading it because it's just very real. And I love real. You mentioned something about that I do want to touch on, and it's like a concept called the closet of boxes. Can you talk a little bit about what that is?
Sure. Yeah. So I knew pretty much right when I landed in the hospital, the first hospital they helicoptered me to, I kind of was in and out of consciousness because even though I said I didn't feel pain initially, I certainly started to feel a lot of pain as the adrenaline wore off. And one of the first things I had to tackle was, I saw the forest in the tunnel, but the tunnel was dark. And I was raised religious. I was raised Catholic. And in my mind, the tunnel was dark and I was going to hell. And it was just like, this is ridiculous. Like, this is horrible. Like, I can't believe that I'm worried about this right now. Like, look at my hands, but yet I'm worried that I'm going to hell. And it was pretty funny. My mom just, squashed that right away on a phone call, which was perfect. Sometimes you listen to your mom, sometimes you don't. But right then, I knew she was right. And she said, it wasn't your time, Melissa. And the tunnel was dark for that reason. And the tunnel was just such an impactful thing to see and be in the presence of, that I knew that I couldn't process it all right then and there, but it wasn't going to ever leave me. But I also needed to think about other things. I needed to think about healing and what this medical prognosis was going to be. And so I went into my mind and I went into the closet, and in the closet, fictional closet of my mind, opened the door and found a box and put the tunnel in it. And not too long after that, I realized there were a lot of other things that I knew was going to take years of healing and visiting to process, but it wasn't just a one thought and done. So forgiving myself was another big thing that I needed to put in the closet, because I did this to myself, right? Obviously not intentionally, but accidents happen all of the time. And this is a huge life accident that has completely altered my life in every way, shape, moving forward. And I knew if I continued to beat myself up for it, and I chose to define myself by my mistake, I would be doing a disservice to my life lived up till that point, and also my potential of my future life, that I knew I still had some potential because I got the chance to come back and try at life. So I needed to forgive myself, but I also knew it wasn't a one and done. Like, forgive myself, it's over. So I put that in the closet as well. And then, of course, I knew that, when someone tells you about 4 fingers, and that's all you're going to have. And your first thoughts of climbing, well, climbing needed to go in the closet for a little bit too. Because I had no idea what our future would look like. So I used it to help compartmentalize, which is, I think, extremely healthy as long as you know that you're going to go back into that closet and you're going to reopen those boxes.
I think it's fantastic the way you've just shared that, because I do see it as healthy. I don't see it as I'm going to avoid it, push it down, ignore it. It's like compartmentalize that. I will get to that box when I am in a space to understand what the next stage is. And that is really what it is required to live in the present moment. And that's the only thing that we do have. And I know it feels like we hear that all the time, but that's the moment that we have. We can't control anything past that and how we respond to it. So I love that concept of how you shared it. And I think the other piece too is this piece on forgiveness. I think for everyone, this is a generalization, but I think for everyone, there comes a point where we have to forgive parts of ourselves and recognize that, yes, maybe we did make mistakes. Maybe we did do something that wasn't the best choice and we're always learning from it. But that some of the biggest healing work I've ever done is in forgiveness of myself. I couldn't get it. I didn't understand it until I realized how important it was.
Yeah. I mean, we're not perfect people. We're humans. And so, each stage of our lives, hopefully we're learning something too. I always say that if I'm not learning, then I really will be gone. That will be the end. And I hope that every day I get to learn something. And with each kind of hurdle or day or even happy day that you have, it helps you give yourself those tools to kind of look back and be like, yeah, maybe I wasn't the best I could have been that day or the nicest I could have been to that person. Or maybe I didn't, I chose the wrong path and I didn't represent myself well. But if we hold on to, again, the negative and what we didn't do well, we're not giving ourselves that chance to grow.
Mm-hmm. We're missing over some of those growth things that we have done to get to see, right? Building that just more belief in ourselves. We cannot skip over this piece. You said it in like one sentence, very simply, but I think it's very important that we highlight. You did get back to climbing.
Yes. Yeah. And it's interesting too, right? Because now we can talk about ego. Because that was a really, it was really challenging because now it was challenging on so many levels, on the basic human pain level. I mean, it was excruciatingly painful. And then, as you get your body interested in doing something that it's telling you it doesn't want to do, it was a mind-body battle. Where my body is just giving me warning signals like it should. You don't have those fingers, your skin grafts, you have raw nerve endings, you don't want to grab that hold, yet my mind wanted to. So I had to retrain my body and kind of learn how to do the dance gracefully again. So initially it was choppy, it was ugly, it was difficult, it was hesitant, it was painful. And then after years, and I wish I could say it was quick, but it wasn't. It was a journey. And it took years before I ever reached for the next climbing hold without doubts or questioning or kind of admonishing myself for even doing it. And then eventually you just retrain muscle memory, you retrain your body, you retrain your outlook, and you retrain your ego. So now I'm going and I'm failing on things that I called the warm-ups. Not many people would do that. I know people that have had damaged hands and they just won't ever climb again because they can't climb at that same level they climbed at. And I give them tons of credit, and it's good to know what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And our journeys are all different. But for me, I'm so grateful that I got the chance to come back and try at life. And I'm so grateful that I got the chance to try at the sport I love so much.
There's so much there that you've shared. Thank you so much for that. It's really like our body's job is to keep us safe. Our subconscious mind, our body's job is to keep us safe. It's its number one job. And that's where you've given an example. I talk about it a lot on the show, but you can't outthink something that your body is saying no. Like the body has to feel safe to do that. And that might mean that it is small, tiny steps, right? It's small pieces. Being okay with that, recognizing that growth. It's beautiful. Honestly, I think it's an absolutely incredible story.
Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time with it. Yeah.
Oh, my
Means a
pleasure.
lot.
Where can people connect and learn more about you and the work that you do?
Well, the website is a great place. It's melissaistrong.com. So I know I said my name is Melissa Strong, informally Melissa Gargano, but no middle name ever, except being Catholic. I got that kind of chosen Catholic confirmation name. So I picked Irene. So that's where the I comes from. So melissaistrong.com has like everything about making the restaurants, the transformation of reconstructing the restaurants. My blog beforehand, when I was just a carefree sponsored rock climber, and my blog today, all of the pictures from, prior, during, and after the accident as well. There's links to where you can purchase the book, so you can buy it online, whether it's Amazon or Barnes and Noble or lots of different book links, booksellers. But I also encourage people to go to their local bookstore and buy the book, because then you're supporting a local small business. And even if they don't have it, they can order the book for you. And then I ask people if they really enjoy the story to, share it with people, because I feel like I got the chance to live again. And remembering the accident is so important to me, because it showed me how far gone I was, that I died a little bit and I got the chance to come back. And so that left me with gratitude for being able to live. And people say, well, you got the chance to come back for a reason. And I'm like, yeah, I just don't think it was to open a restaurant or two. So maybe it's to share this story and give people, some tools to use while they're going through a hard time.
I love how even just the mindset of searching for the reasons, like being open to that. There are reasons. There's a bigger reason why I'm here. There's a bigger reason I can share this story and can help someone else out with it. It's absolutely incredible. So I'll make sure everything is in the show notes. I have loved the conversation. You are definitely someone who inspires me, and I know the listeners as well. And I would love to ask you one question, which is the one I ask everyone at the end. It is, what lesson in life are you most grateful for?
I guess it's gratitude. It's just being able to be thankful no matter what we have, no matter how hard and horrible life can be. And it can be, and it keeps delivering. That just the gratitude that we get to be here as humans on this earth and interact with each other and kind of help each other out. And as I say in the book a lot, be the webbing in each other's safety net.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for reading the book and sharing my story. It means a lot.